The moment Lady Eleanor Ashbourne stepped forward to defend a trembling kitchen maid, she knew she had just destroyed her family's last hope of salvation. The accusation had come swiftly, delivered with theatrical outrage by Lady Margaret Whitmore, whose venomous tongue was as sharp as her jewels were plentiful. The maid, a pale-faced girl named Betsy, who could not have been more than 16, had been discovered in the library after midnight. A silver candlestick, an heirloom worth more than most servants earned in a lifetime, was missing from its customary place on the mantel. Betsy had been found weeping in the corridor, her hands empty, her protests of innocence drowned out by Lady Margaret's shrieks. "The girl is a thief," Lady Margaret declared, her voice carrying across the crowded drawing room where the cream of London society had gathered for the Ashbourne family's annual autumn ball. "I have seen her lurking about where she has no business. She should be dismissed immediately. Better yet, she should be handed over to the magistrate." Lord Ashbourne, Eleanor's father, stood rigid with embarrassment. His family's fortunes had been dwindling for years, and this ball, this desperate, expensive gesture, was meant to signal that the Ashbournes remained relevant, remained respectable, remained worthy of consideration from powerful families like the Whitmores. He could not afford scandal. He could not afford enemies, and so he nodded, his face pale, and opened his mouth to condemn the girl. That was when Eleanor moved. She had been standing at the edge of the room, her hands clasped so tightly that her fingernails bit into her palms. She had watched the scene unfold with growing horror, not because she believed Betsy innocent. She did not know the girl well enough to make such a judgment, but she had seen the way Lady Margaret's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction, and she had seen the way Betsy's thin shoulders shook with terrified sobs. Eleanor had also seen something else, something that made her stomach twist with cold certainty. She had seen Lord Whitmore, Margaret's husband, slip away from the library shortly before the commotion began. She had seen the bulge in his coat pocket that had not been there earlier. She could not prove that the candlestick was in his possession. She could not even be certain that her eyes had not deceived her, but she knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a young woman who had spent years learning to read the hidden language of desperate people, that Betsy was being used. And so she stepped forward, her silk slippers silent on the polished floor, and she spoke. "Your Grace, my lords, ladies, please." Everyone turned to stare at her. Eleanor felt the weight of 40 pairs of eyes, some curious, some dismissive, some already anticipating the entertainment of watching a foolish girl embarrass herself. Her father's face drained of whatever color remained. Lady Margaret's lips curled into a smirk of pure triumph. Eleanor did not falter. "I do not pretend to know who took the candlestick," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "But I ask you to consider whether a young woman who has served this household faithfully for 3 years would risk everything for a single piece of silver. If Betsy intended to steal, would she not have chosen something smaller, something she could conceal more easily? Would she not have escaped, rather than remain in the corridors, where anyone might find her?" She paused. The room had gone deathly silent. "And if I may be so bold," Eleanor continued, "I would ask whether any of you actually saw Betsy take the candlestick, or did you only see her running from the library after the theft was discovered? There is a difference between guilt and panic." Lady Margaret's smirk vanished. Her eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "Are you accusing me of falsehood, Lady Eleanor?" she asked, her voice dripping with honeyed venom. "I am accusing no one," Eleanor replied, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I am only asking that we exercise patience. Perhaps the candlestick will be found in the morning, misplaced rather than stolen. Perhaps you are protecting a thief because you are too soft-hearted for your own good," Lady Margaret interrupted. "How very quaint, how very provincial. The insult landed like a slap. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with heat, but she refused to look away. "Better to be provincial than cruel," she said quietly. The room gasped. Lord Ashbourne stepped forward, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Eleanor, that is enough! You will apologize to Lady Margaret at once." Eleanor looked at her father, and something in her chest cracked. She had always tried to be the perfect daughter, obedient, graceful, eager to please. She had smiled through endless dinners with tedious men her father hoped would propose. She had worn uncomfortable gowns and nodded at opinions she found insufferable. She had done everything she could to help restore her family's fading reputation. But she could not, would not, stand by while an innocent girl was destroyed to satisfy a bully's appetite for cruelty. "I cannot apologize for asking for fairness, father," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I cannot." She turned to Lady Margaret and curtsied deeply, the gesture formal and cold. "I meant no offense, my lady. I only wish to ensure that justice is served, not vengeance." Then she looked at Betsy, who had collapsed to her knees, weeping silently. "Betsy will remain in my chambers tonight," Eleanor said. "I will take responsibility for her. If the candlestick is found in her possession, I will personally escort her to the magistrate myself. But until then, she will not be dismissed." The room erupted into whispers. Lord Ashbourne's face went from pale to ashen. Lady Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. And Eleanor knew, with absolute certainty, that she had just made an enemy of one of the most powerful women in London. She also knew that her family's already precarious position had just become infinitely worse. But as she helped Betsy to her feet and led the weeping girl through the crowd of whispering aristocrats, Eleanor felt something she had not felt in years. She felt proud of herself. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Lord Ashbourne did not speak to his daughter for 3 days. When he finally broke his silence, it was to inform her that Lady Margaret Whitmore had told everyone within earshot that the Ashbournes were not to be trusted, that they housed servants who stole and daughters who defended criminals. "The Whitmores have influence," her father said, pacing the drawing room like a caged animal. "They have connections. They could destroy everything we have worked to rebuild. Do you understand that, Eleanor? Do you understand what you have done?" Eleanor stood before him, her hands clasped before her, her spine rigid. "I understand that I could not allow an innocent girl to suffer for a crime she did not commit." "Innocent? How do you know she is innocent? Because she wept? Because she looked frightened?" "Every criminal weeps when caught, Eleanor. Every criminal looks frightened." "Betsy did not take that candlestick," Eleanor said. "I am certain of it." "And what makes you so certain?" Eleanor hesitated. She could not accuse Lord Whitmore without evidence. She had not seen him take the candlestick, only suspected him. And even if she had seen him, who would believe her? Lord Whitmore was a respected peer of the realm. She was merely the daughter of a desperate man. "I simply believe she is telling the truth," Eleanor said finally. Her father laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You believe? How touching! How utterly naive! You think the world cares about what you believe, Eleanor. The world cares about appearances. The world cares about reputation. The world cares about who has power and who does not. And right now, we have very little power indeed." Eleanor swallowed hard. "What would you have had me do, father? Allow an innocent girl to be destroyed to appease Lady Margaret?" "I would have had you think before you spoke," he snapped. "I would have had you consider your family before yourself. But you have never been able to do that, have you? You have always been too busy playing the saint." The accusation stung. Eleanor had spent her entire life trying to please her father. She had sacrificed her own happiness time and again, for the sake of her family's reputation. She had smiled at men who repulsed her, and curtsied to women who sneered at her. And now, when she had finally done something she believed was right, she was being punished for it. "Father, That will be all," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "I have business to attend to. Business that you have made infinitely more difficult." Eleanor left the room with tears burning in her eyes. She made her way to her bedchamber, where Betsy waited, pale and trembling. "You should not have defended me, my lady," Betsy said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am not worth the trouble." Eleanor sat beside her and took her hand. "You are worth every moment of trouble," she said firmly. "You are a good person, Betsy, and good people deserve to be defended." Betsy began to cry again, but this time the tears seemed relief rather than fear. "No one has ever defended me before," she whispered. "No one has ever stood up for me." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Then, I am glad to be the first." She did not know that word of her actions had already reached the most powerful man in the neighborhood, and that his reaction would change her life forever. 3 days after the disastrous ball, Eleanor received a summons. It came in the form of a sealed letter delivered by a liveried footman, the paper thick and expensive, the wax seal bearing the crest of the Blackthorne family. Eleanor stared at it for a long moment, her heart racing. The Blackthornes were the most powerful family in the county, perhaps in all of England. Duke Edmund Blackthorne, the head of the family, was known for his strict sense of honor, his formidable intellect, and his cold, impenetrable demeanor. He was also known for his hatred of injustice. Eleanor opened the letter with trembling fingers. "Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, I request your presence in my private study at Blackthorne Hall tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Come alone. Tell no one. This matter is of great importance. Edmund Blackthorne, Duke of Ravenshire." Eleanor read the letter 3 times, her mind racing. What could the Duke possibly want with her? They had never spoken. She had seen him at balls and dinners, had observed him from across crowded rooms, but they had never exchanged a single word. Why would he summon her to his private study, a place no one entered without direct invitation? The only thing she could think of was the ball. Someone must have told him about her defense of Betsy. Perhaps he had heard the story and wished to offer his support. Or perhaps, and this was the thought that made her stomach clench with dread, he wished to chastise her for causing a scene in his presence. Duke Blackthorne had been at the ball. She remembered seeing him standing near the back of the room, his expression unreadable as the drama unfolded. He had not spoken. He had not intervened. He had simply watched, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Now he wanted to see her, alone, in his private study. Eleanor knew she could not refuse. A duke's summons was not optional, no matter how frightened she might be. And she was frightened, more than she wanted to admit. The Duke of Ravenshire was not a man to be trifled with. He was known for his rigid adherence to propriety, his intolerance of foolishness, and his ability to destroy anyone who crossed him. What if he had decided that she had embarrassed him by causing a scene at the ball? What if he intended to demand that she apologize publicly? What if he intended to make an example of her? Eleanor spent the next day in a state of anxious anticipation. She could not concentrate on anything. She could not eat. She could not sleep. She paced her bedchamber until her legs ached, her mind spinning with possibilities. When the time finally came to dress for her meeting, she chose her plainest gown, a simple dark blue silk that made her look serious and subdued. She pinned her hair back severely, avoiding any ornamentation that might be seen as frivolous. She wanted to appear respectful, serious, and above all, apologetic. She had no idea how badly she had misjudged the situation. Blackthorne Hall was the most magnificent estate Eleanor had ever seen. She had passed by it many times, but she had never been inside. The grand entrance hall alone was larger than her entire family home, its soaring ceilings adorned with paintings of blackthorn ancestors, its marble floor gleaming with a mirror-like polish. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, its candles casting warm light across the space. The footman who greeted her was impeccably dressed and utterly expressionless. He led her through a labyrinth of corridors, past rooms filled with priceless art and furniture that must have cost more than her father's entire estate. Eleanor tried not to gawk, but it was difficult. Finally, the footman stopped before a heavy oak door and knocked twice. "Enter," said a deep voice from within. The footman opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for Eleanor to enter. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into the Duke's private study. The room was large but not ostentatious. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that looked well-read rather than merely decorative. A large desk dominated the center of the room, covered with papers and ledgers. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows across the space. Duke Edmund Blackthorne stood by the window, his back to her. He was tall and powerfully built, his dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. He wore a simple but exquisitely tailored coat of dark blue, his cravat immaculate. Eleanor curtsied deeply and waited in silence. The Duke did not turn around for a long moment. When he finally did, his expression was unreadable. Dark eyes swept over her, assessing her in a way that made her feel as though she were being examined under a microscope. "Lady Eleanor Ashbourne," he said, "thank you for coming." "I could hardly refuse a summons from your grace," Eleanor replied, her voice carefully neutral. The Duke's lips twitched slightly. Almost a smile, but not quite. "No, I suppose you could not. Please, sit." He gestured to a chair before his desk. Eleanor sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart pounding. The Duke did not sit. Instead, he walked to the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of sherry. He offered one to Eleanor, who accepted it with trembling fingers. "You have no doubt wondered why I asked you here," he said, settling into his chair behind the desk. "I imagine you have spent the entire day considering the possibilities." "Yes, Your Grace," Eleanor admitted. "I confess I am quite confused." The Duke studied her for a long moment. "I was at the Ashbourne ball last week. I observed your defense of the young maid, Betsy, I believe her name is." Eleanor's heart sank. Here it came, the reprimand. "I should apologize," she said quickly. "It was not my intention to cause a disturbance. I only—" "Apologize?" The Duke raised an eyebrow. "Why would you apologize?" Eleanor blinked. "Because I caused a scene. Because I embarrassed my family in front of your guests. Because Lady Margaret was—" "Lady Margaret Whitmore is a bully," the Duke interrupted flatly. "She has been a bully her entire life. She would not recognize justice if it bit her on the nose. You did nothing wrong, Lady Eleanor. You stood up for an innocent person. Why would you possibly apologize for that?" Eleanor stared at him, utterly stunned. You do not think I was foolish." "I think you were brave," the Duke said simply. "I think you demonstrated a quality that is very rare in our circles. Genuine moral courage. Do you know how many people in that room saw Betsy crying and thought to themselves, she might be innocent? I would wager several. I know I did. But do you know how many of them spoke up? Only you." Eleanor felt tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I only did what I believed was right." "Yes," the Duke said. "That is precisely what I wanted to discuss with you." He rose from his chair and walked to the window, his back to her once more. "Lady Margaret Whitmore is not merely a bully," he said quietly. "She is involved in something far more serious than petty cruelty. She and her husband have been systematically targeting families in this county, financially ruined them, destroyed their reputations, driven some to the brink of suicide. They do it for power, for control, for the sheer pleasure of watching others suffer. Eleanor felt cold. I did not know. No one knows, the Duke said. That is precisely the problem. The Whitmores are clever. They are careful. They always make sure their victims appear to be at fault. They spread rumors. They manufacture evidence. They destroy anyone who threatens their position. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with an intensity that made Eleanor's breath catch. I have been investigating the Whitmores for 3 years, he said. I have gathered evidence. I have spoken to victims. I have built a case that could destroy them, but I have not been able to bring it to the proper authorities because I have been missing one crucial element. Eleanor swallowed hard. What is that? A witness, the Duke said. Someone with the courage to speak publicly. Someone whose testimony cannot be dismissed as motivated by greed or revenge. Someone like you. Eleanor's heart stopped. Me? The Duke nodded slowly. You have already demonstrated that you are willing to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. You have shown that you cannot be intimidated into silence, and you have made an enemy of Lady Margaret Whitmore, which means she will try to destroy you now, just as she has destroyed so many others. Eleanor's mind raced. She thought of her father, already struggling to maintain their family's position. She thought of Betsy, still weeping in her bedchamber. She thought of all the other innocent people who had been destroyed by the Whitmores' cruelty. Are you asking me to testify? She asked. I am asking you to help me bring them to justice, the Duke said. I am asking you to help me save countless other families from suffering as your family has suffered. I am asking you to be brave one more time and to trust that I will protect you. Eleanor looked into his eyes. She saw something there she had not expected. Vulnerability, hidden beneath the mask of authority. She saw a man who had been fighting alone for too long. She thought of her father's words. The world cares about who has power and who does not. But perhaps that was only true if you allowed it to be. Tell me what I must do, Eleanor said quietly. The Duke's plan was simple but dangerous. Eleanor would pretend to befriend Lady Margaret, to seek her favor, to flatter her, to become her confidant. In doing so, she would learn the details of the Whitmores' schemes and provide evidence that could be used against them. But why would Lady Margaret trust me? Eleanor asked. She must know that I am her enemy. She knows that you defended the maid, the Duke agreed, but she does not know why. She assumes, as most people would, that you did it out of misplaced sympathy or a desire to appear virtuous. She does not know that you are capable of deeper thought. She will underestimate you because you are young, because you are a woman, and because you come from a family that is desperate for allies. Eleanor nodded slowly. And when I have gathered sufficient evidence, then I will bring the case before the appropriate authorities, the Duke said. The Whitmores will be ruined. Their victims will receive justice, and you will be remembered as the woman who made it all possible. Eleanor felt a strange thrill at his words. She had spent her entire life being invisible. The dutiful daughter, the polite guest, the pretty decoration. No one had ever asked her to be anything more. Now she was being asked to become a spy, to bring down a powerful family, to make a real difference in the world. She did not hesitate. I will do it, she said. The next several weeks were a masterclass in deception. Eleanor attended social events where Lady Margaret would be present, always positioning herself to be noticed. She flattered the older woman's vanity, praising her taste in fashion, her skill at hosting, her influence over society. She deferred to Lady Margaret's opinions, nodded at her pronouncements, and carefully avoided any topic that might cause conflict. At first, Lady Margaret was suspicious, She watched Eleanor with narrowed eyes, clearly waiting for the trap. But Eleanor was patient. She played the role of the naive young woman seeking guidance, the humble daughter of a struggling family, desperate for powerful allies. Slowly, Lady Margaret's defenses began to lower. "My dear girl," she said one afternoon, patting Eleanor's hand with false warmth, "I do believe I misjudged you. You are not nearly as foolish as you appeared at that dreadful ball. In fact, I think you might be quite clever." Eleanor smiled modestly. "I only want to learn from those who are wiser than myself, my lady." "Wise," Lady Margaret repeated, pleased. "Yes, I suppose I am rather wise. I have learned a great deal about people over the years, about how to tell who is useful and who is dangerous, about how to protect oneself from those who would do one harm." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression eager. "I would so love to learn such skills. My father is always worried about our family's position, but he never seems to know how to improve it. I confess, I find it terribly frustrating." Lady Margaret's eyes gleamed with interest. "Your father is not the only one who worries about such things, my dear. You would be surprised how many powerful families are actually quite vulnerable. One wrong move, one careless word, and everything can crumble." Eleanor nodded earnestly. "I wish I knew how to protect my family from such things." Lady Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Perhaps I can help you," she said. "But you must be careful, my dear. There are some things that are not safe to discuss openly." Eleanor's heart raced. The hook had been set. "I would be most grateful for any guidance you could offer," she said softly. "I will be discreet, I promise." Lady Margaret nodded slowly. "Good, then let us begin." Over the following weeks, Lady Margaret revealed more and more of her true nature. She spoke of how she had ruined a young woman who had dared to catch her husband's eye, not by seducing him, but simply by being kind to him. She spoke of how she had fabricated evidence of theft and adultery, ensuring that the woman and her family were destroyed socially and financially. "It is not always necessary to be cruel," she said, as if discussing the weather. "Sometimes a simple rumor is enough. People are so eager to believe the worst of others. You simply give them a nudge in the right direction, and they do the rest themselves." Eleanor nodded, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "And if they try to defend themselves?" "Then you make it worse," Lady Margaret said. "You say they are lying. You find witnesses to support your version of events. You make their lives so miserable that they eventually give up fighting." Eleanor felt sick, but she forced herself to smile. "You are truly masterful, my lady." Lady Margaret preened. "It is simply a matter of understanding how power works, my dear. Those who have it must use it, or they will lose it. Those who do not have it must either submit or be destroyed. There is no middle ground." Eleanor filed away every detail, reporting everything to the Duke in private meetings held late at night in his study. "You are doing well," the Duke told her one evening. "Better than I could have hoped. Lady Margaret trusts you. She is revealing details she has never revealed to anyone else." Eleanor nodded, but her smile was strained. "It is difficult," she admitted, "to pretend to admire someone so cruel, to nod and smile while she describes destroying innocent people." The Duke's expression softened with sympathy. "I know, but you are doing a great service, Lady Eleanor. The evidence you are gathering will be invaluable when the time comes to bring charges." "When will that be?" Eleanor asked. "Very soon," the Duke said. "But before I can act, I need one final piece of evidence. Lady Margaret has mentioned a ledger, a record of bribes and payments made to various officials. If I can obtain that ledger, I will have all the proof I need." Eleanor looked at him. "Where is the ledger?" The Duke's jaw tightened. "In the Whitmore estate, in Lord Whitmore's private study. hidden behind a painting of his grandmother. I have been trying to find a way to retrieve it for months, but their household is guarded too carefully. Any intruder would be caught immediately. Eleanor understood what he was not saying. Unless the intruder was invited, she said slowly. Unless the intruder was someone the Whitmores trusted. The Duke did not deny it. I cannot ask you to do that, Eleanor. It would be too dangerous if you were caught. I would say I was looking for the library, Eleanor said. I would say I got lost. I am a young woman making a foolish mistake. Who would suspect me of anything else? The Duke stared at her. Eleanor, let me do this, she said firmly. I am already committed to this cause. I have come this far. Let me finish what I started. The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Very well, he said, but you must be careful. If anything goes wrong, if you feel at all threatened, you must leave immediately. Do not risk yourself for the sake of the ledger. There will be other opportunities. Eleanor nodded, but she knew she would not abandon the plan. She had sacrificed too much, risked too much, to give up now. The Whitmore estate was vast and opulent, filled with the kind of wealth that came from generations of exploitation. Eleanor arrived for tea with Lady Margaret, her heart pounding beneath the calm exterior she had cultivated. She smiled and chatted, complimented Lady Margaret's gown and the exquisite pastries served by the footman. After tea, she excused herself to find the powder room, and instead made her way to Lord Whitmore's study. The door was unlocked. Eleanor slipped inside, her senses on high alert. The painting of Lord Whitmore's grandmother was exactly where the Duke had said it would be. Eleanor moved it aside with trembling fingers, revealing the safe hidden behind it. She knelt before the safe, her heart racing. The combination was printed on a scrap of paper tucked into Lady Margaret's vanity drawer, a detail Eleanor had memorized months ago, not knowing when it would be useful. She spun the dial, her fingers slick with sweat. Left, right, left. The safe clicked open. Inside lay the ledger. Eleanor pulled it out, her hands shaking. It was thick with entries, years of bribes, threats and payoffs, carefully recorded in Lord Whitmore's precise handwriting. It was everything the Duke needed. She tucked the ledger into her bodice, where it was concealed beneath her gown. Then she closed the safe, repositioned the painting, and slipped out of the study. She made her way back to the drawing room, her smile firmly in place, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Lady Margaret was waiting, her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You have been gone a long time, my dear," she said. "Are you feeling quite well?" "I am perfectly fine," Eleanor said, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I simply lost my way. This house is so large, it is quite easy to become confused." Lady Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, the cold, predatory smile Eleanor had come to recognize. "I am sure," she said. "Shall we take a turn about the garden? The roses are in bloom." Eleanor wanted to refuse. She wanted to leave as quickly as possible, but she knew she could not raise suspicion. "I would love to," she said. The garden was beautiful, but Eleanor barely noticed. She was too focused on getting through the next hour without betraying herself. Lady Margaret led her along the gravel paths, pointing out flowers and discussing their cultivation. Eleanor nodded and smiled, her mind racing with escape plans. It was only when they returned to the house that disaster struck. Eleanor was descending the grand staircase, her hand on the polished banister, when she felt something shift in her bodice. The ledger. She had not secured it properly. In a moment of pure horror, she watched as the book slipped free, tumbling down the stairs to land at the feet of Lord Whitmore himself. The world seemed to stop. Lord Whitmore stared down at the ledger, His face went pale, then red with fury. He looked up at Eleanor, his eyes blazing with murderous rage. "You little," he began. Eleanor did not wait to hear what he intended to say. She turned and ran. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that she had to escape, had to get away before Lord Whitmore could stop her. She heard his footsteps pounding behind her, heard Lady Margaret's shrieks echoing through the halls. She burst through the front door and ran down the drive, her slippers slipping on the gravel. The gates were ahead. If she could just reach them, if she could just— A hand closed around her arm, yanking her back. Lord Whitmore's grip was iron, his face twisted with fury. "Did you think you could steal from me?" he snarled. "Did you think I would not notice?" Eleanor's heart raced. "Let me go, please. I do not know what you are talking about." "You are a liar," Lord Whitmore hissed. "A little liar, just like all the others." He pulled her back toward the house. Eleanor tried to resist, but he was too strong. She was going to be dragged inside, imprisoned, perhaps killed. And then she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Duke Edmund Blackthorne was riding toward them, his face like thunder. He pulled his horse to a halt and leaped down, striding toward Lord Whitmore with the force of a charging bull. "Unhand her," he commanded. Lord Whitmore's grip tightened. "This is not your concern, Blackthorne. This woman is a thief. I found her stealing from my study." "Did you?" The Duke's voice was cold. "And what exactly did she steal?" Lord Whitmore hesitated. "My personal papers, business documents. I do not know what she intended to do with them, but—" "You found her with my ledger," the Duke said calmly. "Because I sent her to retrieve it. I have been investigating you for years, Whitmore. The ledger is evidence of your crimes, and I am here to ensure that it reaches the proper authorities." Lord Whitmore's face went pale. You cannot." "I can, and I will," the Duke said. "Now let her go." For a moment, Lord Whitmore seemed to consider refusing. Then he released Eleanor's arm, shoving her forward so violently that she stumbled. The Duke caught her, steadying her with a firm hand. "Are you all right?" he murmured. Eleanor nodded, too shaken to speak. The Duke turned to Lord Whitmore. "You are under arrest, Whitmore. I have brought the constable and a magistrate. They are waiting at the gates. You and your wife will be charged with bribery, extortion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your victims will finally receive justice." Lord Whitmore's face contorted with rage. "You will not get away with this. I have friends in high places, powerful friends. They will do nothing," the Duke interrupted. "Your friends will abandon you now that your crimes have been exposed. You are finished, Whitmore. Accept it." Lord and Lady Whitmore were arrested that day, and their trial was swift. The evidence in the ledger was damning. Victims came forward, their stories corroborating the details recorded in Lord Whitmore's own handwriting. The Whitmores were found guilty on all charges, stripped of their titles and estates, and sentenced to transportation to the colonies. Eleanor watched from the gallery, her heart heavy with satisfaction and sorrow. She had helped bring down a pair of monsters. She had avenged the countless victims whose lives had been destroyed by their cruelty. But she had also lost something. Lady Margaret's final words echoed in her mind. "You think you have won, but you have lost more than you know. You have sold your soul for the approval of a man who does not care about you. He will never love you. He is incapable of love." Eleanor had tried to dismiss the words as the ravings of a defeated enemy, but they had burrowed into her heart like a poison. Did Edmund love her? The Duke had been nothing but kind to her since the arrest. He had praised her courage, defended her against her critics, and ensured that her family's reputation was restored. He had made her father wealthy again, arranging for the Ashbourne family's debts to be forgiven and their estate to be restored. But he had never spoken of love. He had never touched her with anything more than friendship. Eleanor told herself that she was being foolish. The Duke was many years her senior. He had a reputation to maintain. He would never consider a woman of her station as anything more than a useful ally. But the hope remained, stubborn and persistent, refusing to die. Several weeks after the trial, Eleanor received another summons to Blackthorn Hall. She entered the Duke's private study, with her heart in her throat. He was standing by the window, just as he had been the first time she had seen him. This time, he turned to face her immediately. "Eleanor," he said, "thank you for coming." "Of course, Your Grace," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Please, sit." She sat. He remained standing, pacing before the window with restless energy. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the events of the past several months, about what you have done for me, for justice, for the countless people who have suffered at the hands of the Whitmores." Eleanor nodded, her heart aching. "I was glad to help." "I know you were," the Duke said, "and that is precisely the problem." Eleanor blinked. "I do not understand." The Duke stopped pacing and faced her directly. "I have spent my entire life alone, Eleanor. My family abandoned me long ago. My friends are acquaintances at best. I have surrounded myself with walls so high that no one could possibly penetrate them. I told myself it was safer that way. I told myself that I did not need anyone. And then you came." Eleanor's heart began to race. "Your Grace, please, let me finish," the Duke said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I saw you defend Betsy at the ball, I was moved. Not because you were brave. Many people are brave, given the right circumstances. But because you were kind. You defended a girl you barely knew, a girl who could do nothing for you. You risked everything for someone who could not repay you. I had never seen anything like it. I told myself I only wanted your help with the investigation. I told myself that was the only reason I sought you out. But I was lying to myself. I wanted to see you again. I wanted to learn more about you. I wanted to know what it felt like to be in your presence." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "Edmund," the Duke knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I know I have no right to ask this of you," he said. "I am too old, too set in my ways. I am not the kind of man you deserve, but I cannot keep pretending that I do not love you." Eleanor laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You are not too old, and you are exactly the kind of man I deserve. You are good, Edmund, truly good. You have shown me what it means to fight for justice, to care about something more than yourself. I have loved you for longer than I am willing to admit." The Duke stared at her, his eyes bright with hope. "You mean it?" "I mean it," Eleanor said. "I love you. I have always loved you." He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against him. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him. "I never thought I would find someone like you," Edmund said against her hair. "I never thought I deserved to be happy." "You deserve everything," Eleanor said fiercely. "Everything and more." The wedding was a small affair, held in the chapel at Blackthorn Hall. Eleanor wore a gown of pale blue silk, her mother's favorite color. Her father walked her down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears of pride. The guests were her family, Edmund's closest friends, and the servants, who had become dear to her. Betsy was there, beaming with joy. She had become Eleanor's personal maid, a promotion she had earned through her loyalty and hard work. Thomas Wren was there too, the scarred groundskeeper who had been so misunderstood for so long. Edmund had publicly apologized to him, and Thomas had forgiven him without hesitation. "In my experience," Thomas had said, "everyone deserves a second chance. especially when they have the courage to admit they were wrong. Eleanor had wept at his words. As she stood before the altar, her hand clasped in Edmund's, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had not known, at the start of this journey, that she would find love. She had not known that defending an innocent maid would lead her to the most powerful man in the county. She had not known that courage and kindness could change the world. But now she knew. Years later, Eleanor and Edmund had a family of their own. 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, who grew up surrounded by love. Eleanor never stopped championing the underdog. She used her position as Duchess of Ravenshire to advocate for servants, for the poor, for anyone who had been unfairly treated. She became known throughout the county as a woman of fierce compassion and unshakable integrity. Edmund supported her every step of the way. "I married the bravest woman in England," he would say, his eyes shining with pride, "and I am grateful every single day." Eleanor would smile and kiss him, the love between them as strong as it had been on the day they first met. The Whitmores were long gone, their names erased from the history books. Their victims had finally received justice, and their descendants had rebuilt their lives. The moral of the story was simple but powerful. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the determination to do what is right, even when doing so is terrifying. Kindness is not weakness. It is the greatest strength a person can possess. And love, true, earned love, is the most powerful force in the universe. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more people discover stories of courage, love, and standing up for what's right. And don't forget to subscribe. Every week, we bring you new tales of historical romance that will make you believe in the power of true love. Also, comment below and tell me, would you have had the courage to stand up for Betsy the way Eleanor did? I'd love to hear your thoughts.